And welcome back to part 2 of this week's upload for the Shabbat services for Waymaker Messianic Jewish and Christian Center USA. This is Shabbat service for January 30th, 2021 on the Gregorian calendar, and on the Hebrew calendar it is Shabbat 165781. And this week we are going to continue our story through the Torah. Beautiful story. And as we see the Exodus, we are in the chapter 13. We're in chapter 13, beginning with verse 17. And we're going to come down to the Sea of Reeds, the Red Sea showdown, very shortly, which is incredible. And there's many times in our life when we have that Red Sea moment, we know God has shown up. Um, so this is what we're going to be getting into in this parashat this week. So join with me now in Parashat Beshalach. And Beshalach very simply means when he sent. And that's the translation. So again, we're going to be in Exodus, beginning with chapter 13, verse 17. After Pharaoh had let the people go, God did not lead them along the road to the land of the Philistines, although that was nearby, for God said the people might change their minds if they see war and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the way of the wilderness to the Sea of Reeds, and Bani Israel went up out of the land of Egypt armed. Moses also took the bones of Joseph. There we go. Remember, we talked about, uh, tuck this in the back of your mind when Joseph said, when God remembers you as a people and brings you up out of this land, don't forget to take my bones out of Egypt. I don't want to be left here. So here we go. Um, Moses also took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had made Bani Israel swear an oath, saying, God will surely remember you, and then you are to carry my bones away with you. So they journeyed from Succoth and encamped in Etham on the edge of the wilderness. Adonai went before them in a pillar of cloud by day to lead the way, and in a pillar of fire by night to give them light, so they could travel both day and night. What a protective um, father we serve. I mean, he made sure B'nai Israel was well taken care of. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night never departed from the people. So that in itself is a miracle. Chapter 14 is the Sea of Reeds showdown, the Red Sea showdown. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to B'nai Israel so that they turn back and encamp before Pi Haharoth, and that is spelled Pi hyphen Hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. You are to camp by the sea opposite Baal Zephon. Pharaoh will say concerning Bnei Israel, they are wandering aimlessly in the land. The wilderness has shut them in. I will harden Pharaoh's heart, so he will follow after them. Then I will be glorified over Pharaoh along with all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am Adonai. So they did so. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his servants had a change of heart towards the people, and they said, What is this that we have done, that we let Israel go from serving us? So he prepared his chariots and took his people with him. He took 600 of the finest chariots along with other chariots of Egypt and captains over them. Adonai hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so he pursued Benaiah Israel. For Benaiah Israel went out with a high hand, but the Egyptians pursued them with all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, as well as his charioteers and his army, and overtook them as they were encamped by the sea beside Pi Hahiroth, opposite Baal Zephon. When Pharaoh drew near, Bani Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them. So they were terrified, and Bnei Israel cried out to Adonai. They said to Moses, "Have you taken us away to die in the wilderness because there were no graves in Egypt? Why have you dealt this way with us to bring us out of Egypt? Did we not say to you in Egypt, 'Let us alone so that we may serve the Egyptians'? It was better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." But Moses said to the people, "Don't be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of Adonai, which he will perform for you today. You have seen the Egyptians today, but you will never see them again. Ever Adonai will fight for you while you hold your peace." Then Adonai said to Moses, "Why are you crying to me? Tell Bnei Israel to go forward. Lift up your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide it. Then Bnei Israel will go into the midst of the sea on dry ground. Then behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they will go in after them, so that I will be glorified over Pharaoh and all his army, his chariots, and his horsemen. Then the Egyptians will know that I am Adonai when I have been glorified over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen." And the angel of God, who went before the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them. Also, the pillar of cloud moved from in front and stood behind them, and so came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. There was the cloud and the darkness over here, yet it gave light by night over there. Neither one came near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. Adonai drove the sea back with a strong east wind throughout the night, and turned the sea into dry land. So the waters were divided. Then Bnei Israel went into the midst of the sea on the dry ground, while the waters were like walls to them on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went in after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. Now it came about during the morning watch that Adonai looked at the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and cloud, and caused the army of the Egyptians to panic. He took off their chariot wheels and caused them to drive heavily, so that the Egyptians said, "Get away from the presence of Israel, for Adonai fights for them against the Egyptians." Then Adonai said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters come back upon the Egyptians, over their chariots and their horsemen." So Moses stretched his hand out over the waters, and the sea returned to its strength at the break of dawn. The Egyptians were fleeing from it, but Adonai overthrew them in the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots, the horsemen, and the entire army of Pharaoh that went after them into the sea. Not one of them remained. But Bnei Israel had walked on dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were like walls to them on their right hand and on their left. So Adonai saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. When Israel saw the great work that Adonai did over the Egyptians, the people feared Adonai, and they believed in Adonai and in his servant Moses. There was within the last 5 years or so, a recent archaeological dig that had found actually chariot wheels in the Red Sea, in the bottom of the Red Sea. I had read an article, so we know that um, we're having, the history is actually showing up and showing to be true. Um, so what we're reading was actually proven in modern times, which is very fascinating. God is always revealing. So I think that's an interesting modern day fact to throw in here, along with you know, ancient day when we're reading about what happened. The Song of Moses and Miriam is chapter 15. Then Moses and Benaiah Israel sang this song to Adonai. I will sing to Adonai, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he is thrown into the sea. Adonai is my strength and song. He has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will glorify him. My father's God, and I will exalt him. Adonai is a warrior. Adonai is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he has hurled into the sea, and his chosen captives have sunk into the sea of reeds. The deeps cover them. They sank to the depths like a stone. Your right high, your right hand, Adonai, is glorious in power. Your right hand, Adonai, dashes the enemy to pieces. In the greatness of your excellency, you overthrow those who resist you. You send forth your wrath. It consumes them as stubble. With a blast of your nostrils, this waters piled up. The flood stood upright as a heap. The deeps became firm ground in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My lust shall gorge on them. I will draw my sword, my hand will destroy them. You blew with your wind, the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who is like you, Adonai, among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, awesome in praises, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand. The earth swallowed them. You, you, in your loving kindness, led the people you have redeemed. You guided them in your strength to your holy habitation. When the peoples hear, they will tremble. Anguish will seize the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom are terrified. Trembling grips Moab's mighty men. All of Canaan's inhabitants will melt away. Terror and dread will fall on them. By the greatness of your arm they become still as stone. Till your people cross over, Adonai, till the people whom you purchased crossed over. You bring them in and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, the place, Adonai, that you have made for yourself to dwell in, the sanctuary, Adonai, which your hands have prepared. Adonai will reign forever and ever. For Pharaoh's horses with his chariots and his horsemen went into the sea, but Adonai brought the waters of the sea back over them. Yet Benaiah Israel walked in the midst of the sea on dry ground. Then Miriam, the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women went out after her with tambourines and with dancing. And Miriam sang to them, Sing to Adonai, for he is highly exalted, the horse and its rider he is thrown into the sea. Bitter waters made sweet. Then Moses led Israel onward from the Sea of Reeds. They went out into the wilderness of Shur, Shur. But they traveled 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, and Marah is a name that means bitter, they could not drink from the waters because they were bitter. On account of this, it was called Marah. So the people complained to Moses, saying, What are we going to drink? So he cried out to Adonai, and Adonai showed him a tree. When he threw it into the waters, they were made sweet. There he made a statute and an ordinance for them, and there he tested them. He said, If you diligently listen to the voice of Adonai your God, do what is right in his eyes, pay attention to his mitzvot. Mitzvot means commandment, and keep all his decrees, I will put none of the diseases on you which I have put on the Egyptians, for I am Adonai who heals you. Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, so they camped there by the waters. Here we go. Manna from heaven, chapter 7. They journeyed on from Elim, and the entire community of Bani Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after leaving the land of Egypt. The whole congregation of Bani Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. So they would go for so long and then they would start complaining. Oh, we're starving. Oh, why did he bring us out here? Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. And after a while, Moses was losing patience with the people. Adonai was losing patience with the people, but they saw many wonders of God, and this is going to be one of them. Benai Israel said to them, If only we had died by the hand of Adonai in the land of Egypt, when we sat by pots of meat, and when we ate bread until we were full, but you have brought us into the wilderness to kill this entire congregation with hunger. Then Adonai said to Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you. These people will go out and gather a day's portion every day so that I can test them to find out whether they will walk according to my Torah or not. So on the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather day by day. So Moses and Aaron said to all Bnei Israel, in the evening you will know that Adonai has brought you out of the land of Egypt, and in the morning then you will see the glory of Adonai, for he heard your complaining against him. What are we? You complain against us. Then Moses said, Adonai will give you meat to eat in the evening, and enough bread to fill you in the morning. Since Adonai hears your complaints that you mutter against him, what are we? Your complaining is not against us, but against Adonai. Moses said to Aaron, say to all the congregation of Bnei Israel, come near before Adonai, because he has heard your complaining. Then as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of Bnei Israel, they looked towards the wilderness, and the glory of Adonai appeared in the cloud. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, I have heard the complaining of Bnei Israel. Speak to them, saying, at dusk you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am Adonai your God. So when evening fell, quails came up and covered the camp. Moreover, in the morning there was a layer of dew all around the camp. When the layer of dew was gone, on the surface of the desert was a thin flake-like frost, as fine as the frost on the ground. When Bnei Israel saw it, they said to one another, what is it? For they did not know what it was. Then Moses said to them, it is the bread that Adonai has given you to eat. This is the word that Adonai has commanded. Every man is to gather according to his needs, an omer per person, according to the number of people per household. Each man is to take it for those who are in his tent. And an omer is a unit, a tenth of a part of an ephah, and an ephah is another measure. It is like a measure of a bushel. So that's what is being gathered. Bnei Israel did so, and some gathered more, some less. When they measured it with an omer, those who gathered more than nothing left over, and those that gathered less did not lack at all. Every man gathered according to his appetite. Also Moses said to them, let no one save any of it until the morning. However, they did not listen to Moses. Some of them preserved it until the morning, but it bred worms and rotted. So Moses was angry with them. So they gathered it morning by morning, each man according to his needs, and as the sun became hot, it melted. On the sixth day they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each individual. So all the leaders of the community came and informed Moses. But he said to them, this is what Adonai has said. Tomorrow is a Shabbat rest, a holy Shabbat to Adonai. Bake whatever you would bake, and boil what you would boil. Store up for yourself everything that remains to be kept until the morning. So they set it aside until the morning, just as Moses instructed, and it did not rot, nor were there any worms. Then Moses said, eat that today, because today is a Shabbat to Adonai. Today you will not find it in the field. You are to gather it for 6 days, but the seventh day is the Shabbat, and there will be none. Yet on the seventh day some of the people went out to gather, and they found none. And then I said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my mitzvah and my Torah? See, Adonai has given you the Shabbat, so on the sixth day he gives you the bread of 2 days. Let every man stay in his place, and let no man go out on the seventh day. So the people rested on the seventh day. Now manna was white like coriander seed, and it tasted like a wafer made with honey. That's how it was described. That was the manna from heaven. The house of Israel named it manna. It was white like coriander seed and tasted like wafers made with honey. Then Moses said, this is what Adonai had commanded. Let a full omer of it be kept throughout your generations, so that they may see the bread with which I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out from the land. Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put a full omer of manna inside it. Store it up before Adonai to be kept throughout your generations." And it was kept in the Ark of the Covenant later, as we will see. Just as Adonai commanded Moses, Aaron stored it up in front of the testimony to be preserved. Bnei Israel ate the manna for 40 years. They ate the manna until they came to an inhabited land, when they came to the borders of the land of Canaan. Now, an omer is the 10th part of an ephah. And again, that would be like a bushel. An ephah is like a bushel. Chapter 17, Test and Quarreling. All the congregation of Bnei Israel journeyed from the wilderness of Sin in stages, according to the command of Adonai, and camped in Rephidim. There was no water for the people to drink. So the people quarreled with Moses again and said, "Give us water to drink." And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test Adonai?" But the people thirsted for water there, and they complained against Moses and said, "Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to kill us with thirst, along with our children and cattle?" So Moses cried out to Adonai, "What am I to do for these people? They are about ready to stone me." Adonai said to Moses, "Walk before the people and take the elders of Israel with you, along with your staff with which you struck the river. Take it in your hand and go. Behold, I will stand before you there upon the rock in Horeb. You are to strike the rock, and water will come out of it, so that these people can drink." And Moses did just so in the eyes of the elders of Israel. The name of the place was called Massah, Massah, and Meribah, Meribah, because of the quarreling of Bnei Israel, and because they tested Adonai, saying, "Is Adonai among us or not?" And then we have war against Amalek. Then the Amalekites came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, "Choose men, go out and fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." So Joshua did as Moses said and fought the Amalekites, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. When Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. But when he let down his hand, the Amalekites prevailed. Moses' hand grew heavy, so they took a stone, put it under him, and he sat down. Then Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on each side, so his hands were steady until the sun went down. So Joshua overpowered the Amalekites and his army with the edge of the sword. Adonai said to Moses, "Write this for a memorial in the book, and rehearse it in the hearing of Joshua, for I will utterly blot out the memory of the Amalekites from under heaven." Then Moses built an altar and called the name of it Adonai Nisi, meaning banner. Then he said, "By the hand upon the throne of Adonai, Adonai will have war with Amalek from generation to generation." That is the end of this week's Torah portion. Very interesting, and we can see, you know, the complaining that went on, but we can also see how Adonai came through for his people time and time again. I mean, he chose them, he led them out of Egypt, but they would lose sight of what was going on as well. It was their trust and their faith wavered, and they began to doubt when things got a little rough. Interestingly enough, the wilderness wandering should have never happened as long as they did. It was because of disbelief that God allowed them to wander as long as they did. So I'm going to come back and we're going to recap this and then go into the Haftorah. We'll come back with a part 3.